Chapter 7. Narcissists. The greatest, the best, and the most beautiful. Narcissists are people who have unrealistic, inflated self-images. They're self-centered and never talk about anything but themselves. These are individuals who genuinely view themselves as entirely unique and very special. They're often highly critical of the rest of us, but entirely blind to their own shortcomings. If they don't receive constant affirmation, they will often lash out. They feel entitled to the best of everything life has to offer. They imagine they're deeply appreciated, even if the opposite happens to be the case. Narcissists are somewhere between dramatic and antisocial individuals. While drama queens seek constant attention and want everything to be enjoyable and simple for them, and bullies are constantly seeking excitement and relief from boredom, narcissists seek recognition and praise for being the most talented, attractive, and intelligent people who have ever walked the earth. They want every possible advantage, and they don't care who they have to push aside to get it. Narcissists go through their lives with the strange misconception that they somehow deserve a better life than everyone else. For some unclear reason, they feel entitled to the best table, the nicest car, the biggest salary, and the loudest praise they can imagine. Not because they've earned these things through hard work or great success, but because they happen to be who they are. That pretty much sums up their worldview. For some reason, they see themselves as divine beings and feel they should be treated accordingly. I've arrived! See me! Obey me! Worship me! The rest of us are just a lowly band of followers who would do best to play along in this peculiar game. If we don't show them the right degree of respect, they're prone to erupt in violent rages. The interesting thing about narcissists is their innate conviction of their own inherent superiority. It's simultaneously horrific and fascinating. And there are very few clinical narcissists out there in society. Depending on who you ask, you tend to get a figure somewhere between 1 and 2%. They can't help having this personality disorder, and no feedback or therapy can change their inner workings. That would be like asking a cat to stop chasing mice. Actually, the nature of a narcissist is quite similar to that of a cat. They act sweet and endearing when it suits their purposes. They are picky about where they sleep and what food they eat. They have that look of unfiltered contempt that says, if I could eat you right now, I would. However, the moment subtle insinuations aren't enough, their claws will come out. Just like cats, narcissists can be absolutely relentless in their attempts to crush their enemies. A cat is also likely to leave the household if something doesn't meet its requirements, and maybe move in with another, more generous family that's wise enough to appreciate its divine presence, only to return suddenly 6 months later and be found in the steps, unflinchingly meeting surprised looks of the family. Then the cat will simply stride right back into the kitchen, settle down by its bowl, and look at you as if to say, "You're getting one last chance, but you'd better get it right this time." There are countless stories showing that narcissists can behave exactly like that. They come and go as they please in relationships. Despite this, plenty of people are very fond of cats. They enjoy that somewhat unpredictable part of cats' personalities. They find that absolute self-control fascinating. It's the same with narcissists. Imagine playing golf or tennis, or working in your garden, or going on a quiz show on television. You're doing really well too. You succeed at everything you try to do. You feel completely amazing, absolutely wonderful, every single second. But at the same time, you are terribly afraid you might lose everything you've worked so hard for. Imagine the pressure you'd be under if everything you did was the act that would decide if you were just like everybody else or a very special person. The greatest fear of a narcissist is being the same as the rest of us. They expect to be extraordinary in every known human domain, regardless of whether they've ever practiced it in the slightest. The mental wall between a state of absolute confidence and the abject terror of being absolutely average is as thin as a sheet of wet tissue paper. Perhaps you would pity them if you hadn't witnessed the horrible lengths they will go to in order to maintain this illusion of superiority. Narcissists can be quite smart. You might believe people who are this smart and well-educated would have learned the value of being considerate to others. Dream on! That's the last thing they would do. It's likely that every discipline that anyone can compete in was invented by a narcissist. And here, I don't just mean sports or business or whatever else comes to mind. I also mean art, literature, music, architecture, anything at all. As long as there is the potential for an ooh and an ah, narcissists will flock there to cash in. Even being good-hearted, they compete in that too. Just look at social media today. Whoever can present themselves as having the biggest heart is the winner. You might have seen all those videos where people give money or a big meal to a homeless person while shoving a camera in their face. It's simply not good enough for the Good Samaritan to be a good person. They have to demonstrate their goodness to everybody else, so we can all exclaim, "Wow, what an amazing person you are!" And then there's cancel culture, which is largely fueled by individuals looking to show everybody that they're better, more righteous, and more good-natured than the likes of you and me. The fact that their methods, which involve absolutely destroying people and maybe ruining their lives, are brutal is neither here nor there. These individuals' goal is to win and appear to be the best at everything. They wouldn't hesitate to be cruel towards one group in order to supposedly relieve the sufferings of another group. They wouldn't flinch at brutally silencing somebody who promotes freedom of speech. They wouldn't lose a second of sleep over committing the most immoral acts imaginable as long as it served to demonstrate the excellence of their morals. Causing somebody to lose their job fills them with glee. The fact that they made sure somebody who had an opinion they deemed unsuitable is now no longer able to put food on the table for their children is no concern of theirs. They'll resort to literally anything to present themselves to the world as they want us to see them, as the best, basically. But all along, they're also the most efficient, dedicated haters out there. That's narcissism in its purest form. Top of the podium without any real prize. When I've described the various kinds of energy vampires in this book to different people, I've made a rather unexpected discovery. Narcissists are, without a doubt, the most hated of the bunch. Much of the stuff you'll read about narcissists relates to personal and mental abuse. Many actually portray narcissists as absolute monsters. Why is this though? I think it's because narcissists use other people as means to their own ends in such blatant, shameless ways. While dramatic individuals are mostly just a pain, passive-aggressive people just refuse to participate, and bullies openly berate and bully people, narcissists attempt to present themselves as wonderful, highly ethical people despite being nothing of the sort. They do this out in the open without ever apologizing for any of their occasionally detestable behavior. I suspect that this explicit sense of entitlement to the best of everything bothers the rest of us and makes us want to judge them harshly, like the mob has done, cheering as they tore down the aristocracy in various revolutions. At the same time, however, we want to love narcissists for daring, for showing courage and ambition, for having the guts to present themselves the same way the rest of us might only dream of doing. Who wouldn't want a never-ending supply of that kind of confidence? What's really going on here? Let's take a more in-depth look at how they actually function. While you read the following section, feel free to ask yourself this question. Is this a person I'd like to keep close, or will they end up draining me of so much energy that I might fall and never get back up? Or, horror of all horrors, do I have any of these traits? A narcissist's self-image is in no way rooted in reality. They are people who, regardless of their personalities and behavior, think of themselves as God's gift to humanity. They walk into the room with the expectation that they will be appreciated and praised simply for being the people they are. And if anybody doesn't realize how wonderful they are, that's just their loss. They can get into discussions about topics they know nothing about, but sound confident enough to make the most informed people doubt themselves. They apply for, and get, jobs they have no qualifications for whatsoever. Just like bullies, narcissists will quite often display precisely the kind of obvious confidence that many employers are looking for. It also works in nightclubs. A narcissist will make a move on an intended partner who, according to every available social code and unwritten rule, is simply out of the narcissist's league. But it works. Both men and women find confidence and audacity attractive. We all know how annoying we find it when people start every single sentence with the word I. We don't always identify what's bothering us, but bother us it does. When we're spending time with narcissists, we simply have no choice but to get used to it. They speak about themselves incessantly. Any subject is likely to morph into a story about themselves. Did you have bad weather on your trip? Well, let me tell you about my vacation a few years ago. Busy at work? You should see my to-do list. In the end, you'll find yourself just wanting to scream. If you do, the narcissist will look surprised. What's the problem? How could you not want to learn more about the most interesting person who's ever lived? Self-obsession deluxe. Since a narcissist is already the best ever at practically everything and will happily share this fact with anyone they come across, they will, of course, also recognize that everybody else must, by definition, be their inferiors. They don't mind sharing this fact either, and they tend to do it in a rather judgmental way. Narcissists quite often enjoy belittling others since it makes them feel more important. The little people aren't really worthy of a narcissist's attention anyway. Although narcissists can be quick to criticize, they're extremely sensitive to the opinions that others hold of them, particularly if they happen to be even slightly negative. Criticism can be interpreted many different ways. On the one hand, it could be genuine criticism, i.e., a negative assessment of the narcissist's performance, say. But it could also be the fact that somebody failed to cheer sufficiently in celebration of the narcissist's amazing work. Since they will always take any criticism as a sign that the world around them doesn't sufficiently appreciate their greatness, they'll respond immediately, often with intense sudden rage. Along with this reaction, they'll feel a thirst for vengeance. Their vengeance can be brutal too. The rules and regulations the rest of us have agreed to simply don't apply to narcissists. Speed limits, social norms, responsibilities at work. They operate beyond the usual rules of society. Narcissists can make an effort to be nice or behave in a polite and welcoming fashion, but as soon as they feel no genuine compulsion to obey these norms, they can drop the pretense with startling speed if provoked. This is one of the reasons why other people seldom genuinely like them. Their lack of respect for the rules makes them exhausting to interact with in the long run. Their relationships are a lot more superficial than they might realize. Narcissists strive for a kind of fictional perfection, to have the very best of everything. Just like little children do, they imagine that they can get away with doing whatever they like because they feel entitled to it. Apart from this, it's also part of their fundamental birthright to live in the most expensive house in the best neighborhood, drive the flashiest car, and only ever be seen in the finest designer clothing. Ideally, they should get all that without having to work for it. This also happens to be the reason why they can treat their fellow human beings so terribly. It's their birthright. They can do anything they want to you or me. In a narcissist's mind, power and fame are highly desirable qualities. Attention matters to them. Funnily enough, they won't insist that the attention they're getting is positive. Negative attention is better than no attention at all. In this respect, narcissists are just like little children. As a consequence, narcissists, much like bullies, find themselves drawn to any place where power and attention tend to concentrate. However, problems will soon arise if people fail to acknowledge the narcissist's great importance. Some narcissists can even show signs of suffering, mild depression if they don't get the attention they crave. Narcissists are quick to spot other people's weaknesses. They will shamelessly exploit these weaknesses to scam anyone they can for whatever they want. Exploiting others comes naturally to them. They're essentially indifferent to other people's emotions and experiences, which makes them very well equipped for manipulation. They're also fairly indifferent to the dangers of being exposed for what they are. This is why they sometimes take strange risks, and it can often be hard to believe how deceitful they really are. Identifying a narcissist. It's time to look at another checklist. Usually, this isn't something that can be used to make a psychiatric diagnosis, but is more of an aid to help you spot patterns you might otherwise overlook. This person, 1. Loves competition but is a sore loser. 2. Fantasizes about amazing achievements and becoming famous and expects to be treated as though these fantasies have already been realized. 3. Is very uninterested in hearing what others think or feel, unless they happen to need something from them. 4. Will often name drop. 5. Doesn't mind exploiting others to reach their goals. 6. Doesn't think the rules apply to them and accordingly doesn't mind breaking them. 7. Interprets criticism as an expression of envy. 8. Suffers from an innate inability to see their own mistakes. 9. Will get their smartphone out in the middle of a conversation with somebody without apologizing. And 10. Complains a lot about being mistreated and misunderstood. Remember what I said earlier? We'd all probably score a few points on a list like this. If somebody scores 5 points, I'd say they're displaying narcissistic tendencies. And at 7 or 8 points, I'd have to say it's a clear case. 10 out of 10? That means it's a good idea to tread very lightly. Sharpening a shark's teeth. Narcissism is commonly misconstrued as being wholly related to self-esteem. However, that's simply incorrect. A narcissist doesn't think like that at all. They already know they're the best, the most attractive, the most popular, and so on. Self-esteem is almost a non-issue for them. They don't need a concept like that to explain to them that they're the most amazing creature who ever lived, just as you and I don't need a concept of oxygen to be able to breathe the air. Some people argue that a narcissist's constant need for affirmation stems from excessively poor self-esteem and that if we could only bolster their self-esteem, their behavior would improve. If we could only teach them to appreciate themselves more, they would accept themselves, and this would stop them from acting like such jerks. Oh boy, what a mistake that would be. It would be like sharpening a shark's teeth and telling it that now that it has such sharp teeth, it has no reason to attack anything. Don't do it. Loving a narcissist. Are narcissists similar to dramatic individuals in romantic relationships? Irritating, frustrating, but tolerable? Well, not really. Narcissists go to much greater lengths to get the adulation they feel they need, which means they're more likely to harm others in order to achieve their goals. Falling victim to a narcissist is a lot more like falling victim to a psychopath. At first, being around their glamour can be quite inspiring, but you'll soon realize that you're just a pawn on their chessboard. As a consequence, you'll end up feeling used. You'll realize that it's always you that's expected to give, help out, and be there for them. The narcissist will ask you for favors all the time, but if you ask them to do something for you, conflict will soon arise. How long will you be prepared to accept their terms? The problem is that once you acquire the habit of accommodating somebody like that, it can be pretty hard to break. This is particularly true if the other party is using every trick they can to convince you to keep it up. You'll be unable to quit, basically. You'll keep on feeling used. This will in turn lead to insecurity, and you'll question whether you actually deserve better than this. In a personal relationship, this can be particularly problematic as the person in question could very well be somebody you love. You might not like her, but you do love her. Emotions are complicated, and this really can happen. The next thought to enter your mind could be that you must be the problem. She did say that after all, and she sounded credible at the time. You're the one who got yourself into this difficult situation, essentially. You're a bad person who doesn't deserve any better. Now, your self-esteem will be dropping off the chart, and soon you'll feel awful, through no fault of your own. You will be plagued by self-doubt. However, just as the old theory says, if you throw enough dirt at somebody, some of it will stick. You'll find that the things the narcissist says and the way she treats you will have an effect on you. Constantly being told that you're only any good if you do exactly what she says can cause a great deal of stress. Just like with bullies, this will vary somewhat depending on the particulars of the relationship. But PTSD is just one of the consequences you're at risk of experiencing. We know that PTSD is common in survivors of dysfunctional relationships, and any relationship with a narcissist is going to be dysfunctional in some way or other. There is also a great risk of experiencing trouble concentrating. You might find that your memory is impaired. You might start losing sleep and worrying about your reduced capacity to perform under time pressure. Brain fatigue could be the reason behind it, and it's a common consequence of staying in a bad relationship for too long. Yellow enters the battle for attention. You'd be amazed if you knew how often I've met people who tell me they're somehow immune to manipulation. It's a naive mindset, to put it mildly. It's also wrong. Nobody is immune to manipulation. A skilled manipulator is actively looking for openings. If they want to con you, in the end they will. It's a lot easier to con somebody than it is to convince them they've been conned too. Usually, people with a task-oriented profiles would get irritated when big egos consume all the oxygen in the room. Blues and reds find it annoying when people keep talking about themselves all the time. A red might take it into their head to sabotage a particularly insufferable narcissist, and this could have rather severe consequences. Narcissists, like psychopaths, can hold some serious grudges. While a red will attack head-on, hard but essentially honestly, the narcissist will go behind their back instead. There, the narcissist will try to turn everyone against the red. This can end with the red getting into some rather serious trouble. However, it also means the red will exclude the narcissist from their circles as soon as the opportunity presents itself. A blue will, usually, stay pretty calm, but register absolutely everything. They will deem the narcissist to be essentially untrustworthy. Blues tend to have very good memories, When a narcissist who's seeking to gain an advantage from the blue makes one promise after another, the blue will remember this. They'll also pick up on the manipulative qualities of this pattern quicker than anyone else on the palette. Blues remember things. However, they don't always reveal all the information they possess. They can solve the mystery in silence. The difference between a blue and a red is that a blue is unlikely to say anything. Once they've figured the puzzle out, the game is over for them. They'll simply withdraw from the narcissist if that's at all possible. Somebody whose profile is dominated by green, yellow especially, it's less marked for green-blue, will be an excellent target for narcissist. Their somewhat evasive and differential demeanor is perfect for a narcissist who doesn't think twice about using other people. Greens are also more tolerant when it comes to having to be there for others. How things will end is a matter of speculation, but narcissists do cause harm to other people. There's no room for doubt here. In close relationships, greens will go to extreme lengths to accommodate all of the narcissist's peculiar whims. When they can't do it, the response will be harsh and brutal. Leaving an intimate relationship will be difficult. Greens are a little passive by nature, and they wouldn't always have the forcefulness to break things out themselves. The end of the world might be nigh in this situation, metaphorically speaking. What do yellows do around narcissists? This one's a bit tricky because just as with the dramatic individuals, yellows actually have some aspects in common with narcissists. They like to begin the sentences with I, and they do spend a lot of time thinking about themselves. However, yellows are actually genuinely interested in other people, which narcissists really aren't. They see the rest of us as resources to be exploited. A yellow is prepared to do a lot to win admiration, but they wouldn't become mean and manipulative like narcissists will. This dynamic can trigger an epic competition for attention. If the narcissist's behavior is too excessive, the yellow will respond much like a red or blue and try to ignore them. If this approach displeases the narcissist, they might start to malign the yellow behind their back. This will have a huge impact on the yellow's ego. Being slandered and being ostracized are two of the worst things a yellow can imagine. They need their groups. Without them, the yellow feels like nothing. They'll definitely begin to hate the narcissist, but they wouldn't always know how to handle them. And I suppose this is where the true challenges for narcissists lies. Nobody really likes them. The most common response to narcissistic behavior is a strange blend of fascination and disgust. This reminds me of the reaction many have when they're around some of the most charming psychopaths. You see what you see, and you often like it and admire their almost outrageous confidence, but at the same time, you can instinctively sense that what seems too good to be true most likely is. However, not everybody responds by distancing themselves from the person in question. Some of us actually try to get closer because it can be quite exciting to be near these people. Call it a buzz of excitement, if you will. At first, a narcissist can make you feel divine, for a moment at least, right before they spring their trap. Does that sound dramatic? Well, if it does, that's because it is dramatic. How to play the game. Naturally, you could do what the title of this section suggests and play along. Just like with everything else, there are different levels of hell, to borrow a worn but apt metaphor. Narcissists may only display a limited number of irritating behaviors. If this is the case, it might be appropriate to give them a little extra space. Basically, give them space to talk about themselves. Let them express themselves. If they happen to be a good friend, you could let them boast for a while and show them that you're appropriately impressed. If you exclaim ooh and ah at the right intervals, your relationship will function a lot better. Ask a lot of questions. Ask them to tell you more and to talk freely. If your friend has been on vacation, ask to hear all about it. And if you feel that they're exaggerating, don't call them out on it. Don't tell them you find it hard to believe that they actually wrestled an alligator. Instead, ask them how they weren't terrified. Now, it might not be easy to play along when you know that what you're listening to is just one long sequence of embellishments and total lies. I realize that. But ask yourself this. Does it really matter? When your friend tells you that they were at the same party as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, does it really cause you any harm? Does this obvious lie actually impact you in any way? When they explain that the apartment they made a down payment on downtown couldn't be sold for some made-up reason, is it really any skin off your nose? When your colleague brags about the Mercedes they're planning on buying, which you know there's no way they can afford, will you be able to congratulate them without thinking about how they're likely to turn up in the same old Ford as usual? What does it really matter? In a workplace, a narcissist might well attempt to take credit for the things other people have done to make themselves look a lot better. They might also break the rules. If you're their manager and you witness this, put a stop to it immediately. Don't put up with it even once. You should make it plain right away that you notice what happened and that you're not okay with it. Act like a slightly indignant parent and tell them, Frederick, you know that you're better than this. I don't want to see this happen again. What will matter, however, is if this potential narcissist tries to use you and treat you badly, or treat others badly in obvious ways. You can't accept that. This situation requires a great deal of vigilance. The same applies to personal relationships. When the behavior goes from being generally annoying and a little childish to manipulative and harmful for people in the vicinity, it's time for you to follow your gut instinct. It's right a lot more often than we can really explain. A general reflection, and an admittedly personal opinion of mine, is that if a relationship feels wrong, it is wrong. All you need to do is think about how you feel deep inside. What would your ideal relationship be like? How would you like to feel when you walk into the office? How would you really like to live your life? Compare these insights with the reality of your relationship with this individual. What's missing for you? What are you putting up with that you prefer to get rid of? Is your gut instinct right? What if you're wrong? Sometimes we can't quite be sure if we're dealing with a real narcissist or just somebody who's going through a few really bad days. It can be difficult to tell if somebody is behaving badly because they don't know any better, i.e. because they're just an ordinary jerk, or if they are a narcissist who is planning to manipulate you and use you any way they can. There are certainly ways to test the waters and find out how bad things are. What follows are some hands-on ideas you can try. Actively look for patterns. Ask yourself, are these random occurrences or does this person act this way routinely? As I just mentioned, anybody could have a bad day, but few people have several bad weeks in a row. Find out if these negative emotions you're experiencing have genuinely been caused by your partner or manager or colleague or friend. The simplest way to do this is to compare what they say with what they do. Narcissists will say almost anything to either make themselves appear better when they are or achieve something they want. It could be service, sex, money, power, attention, or anything at all. This is an effective way of isolating the problem as long as you know what to look for. When they promise to do X, double check whether X really got done. If they did X plus something else, that might be okay. If they did X minus some detail, that might also be okay. You'll have to judge this on a case-by-case basis. Nobody's perfect after all, and you don't want to come across as a habitual perfectionist. You might have to accept some degree of flexibility. However, if instead of X, what they did was a big case of Y, or even number 4 instead of X, you have a problem on your hands. This means that what you're dealing with is somebody who doesn't take their own words seriously. Don't accept excuses like this. You're just imagining that stuff. I never said that. You've always been hysterical. You're the problem, really, not me. I don't understand what I see in you, and so on. None of that has anything to do with the real world. All that matters is whether this person's words match their deeds to an acceptable extent. Simple, no? Take notes. Sounds strange? Maybe it is. However, a motivated narcissist will become an expert at twisting people's minds. Taking notes of the things somebody says to you might seem extreme, but you shouldn't rely on your memory too much. Also, making it very obvious that you're actually taking these notes is a good way to discourage future attempts at manipulation. Imagine that your narcissistic partner tells you he's going to the pub with John and possibly Eric this weekend. However, from experience, you can tell there is something else going on. In order to keep from being manipulated, you should say the following out loud as if you were speaking to yourself. I'm terrible at names. I'm just making a note on my calendar that you're going out with John and Eric on Saturday. This will make it a lot more difficult for your partner to lie when it turns out that neither Eric nor John saw him the weekend in question. Sometimes, liars are opportunists. If he's planning on going out and meeting women in bars and then claims never to have told you he would be meeting Christian, whose number you don't have, instead of Eric, things will get a lot more complicated for him. Also, you'll be able to notice this pattern of lies much more quickly. When your manipulator can see you taking note of things, he'll know that path is a dead end. This might all sound rather odd, and honestly, if you feel that you need to write down the things your partner tells you, it's very possible that your relationship is less than ideal. Another thing to pay good attention to is favors and return favors. A narcissist will be very open to receiving favors from you and will be masterful at making you think there is no way they could manage without your help. They might tell you they need you to give them something. Your time so you can help them finish their work, your money so they can afford things, or your ears so you can listen to their narcissist's problems. All of those things could be perfectly fine in a functional relationship. If you have a partner or a coworker or a good friend you care about, you'll naturally be there for them. However, eventually, the delicate situation where you're the one needing help will arise. I'm not suggesting you trade favors back and forth, that's more of a transaction than genuinely helping each other, but always being the one to give can eventually bring about a harsh realization. That's what you'll discover about narcissists. When you're the one who needs time, advice, attention, or whatever it may be, they will always be busy. They'll give you a reason that might not sound very plausible, but the true reason for their unwillingness to do whatever it is you're asking for will always be the same. They're not interested in you the same way they're interested in themselves. This too will probably be a pattern that might take some time to discover. Naturally, this means you'll have to get more vigilant and observant. You need to become more aware, basically. As I mentioned earlier, you need to compare their words to their deeds. Although many people make promises they have no intention of ever keeping, narcissists do it so often that unfulfilled commitments linger around them like a bad smell. When confronted with this, a normal person who's just a little selfish will say something along the lines of, "Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I never thought of it that way before and I'm going to make more of an effort now." Now, you'll be able to have an adult conversation about honesty and respect, and this may very well trigger new positive development in the relationship. As is the case with bullies or full-on psychopaths, there are some obvious risks involved in being too close to a narcissist for too long. It can be harmful, particularly mentally. A woman I met described her 30-year marriage to a narcissist like this. "It was as though my whole life had been a lie. A narcissist will never change. Walk away." It sounds dramatic, but that's only because it really is dramatic. Even if you think you love this person, you shouldn't spend another minute in their presence. Even if it's your dream job, you shouldn't stay and tough it out. Things aren't going to improve. Walk away. Even if they're the only friend you've ever had, you shouldn't let them continue to walk all over you. Don't drink poison just because you're thirsty, not even in small doses. Eventually, you'll have filled your system with so much misery that you're never going to break free. You deserve better than to be used and then tossed aside by a narcissist. I'm giving you my permission. Walk away. Be strong. Walk away. A personal reflection. This is one of the most difficult energy vampires to deal with, and as you've realized by now, I'm suggesting that it might be best for you not to try. If you've fallen victim to a narcissist who would check off a lot of boxes on the list earlier in the chapter, you're bound to have felt some of this. PTSD is a common side effect, which you should take very seriously. If this applies to you, I'd like to suggest that you seek help at the first opportunity. You can heal, but it's going to be difficult to manage on your own. There are plenty of competent psychologists and therapists who specialize in this particular situation, and although it can cost some money, I'd suggest that it's worth it. After all, this is the rest of your life we're talking about.